So, we're going to be talking about Elon Musk, or at least starting there, and why he's basically Elon Musk, right, is in the process of overthrowing the government. He's an unelected tyrant who's going to change the face and of reality and destroy democracy as we know it, which is what Chuck Schumer told me and is the most reliable source of information that I have access to. So, Nima, how badly do you think Elon Musk is going to trounce all over democracy?
Well, also another thing is that he apparently now has access. So apparently, it's a concern that the government has access to private data now. Suddenly, according to Democrats, when they've backed the NSA and the National Security State and persecuted Snowden and all the whistleblowers, Dave Binney, etc., for all these years. But now somebody looking at cutting waste is somehow an invasion into our privacy. I'd like to understand that a little better.
Yeah, here's Chuck Schumer, and maybe he'll explain it for us.
And we cannot allow Elon Musk and a small group of people to secretly, behind closed doors, take away our privacy.
Whoa! Since when? Since when can we not allow? Because I completely agree with him. We cannot allow a small group of people behind closed doors to take away our privacy. But hasn't that been happening since 2001? I mean, obviously before that too, but really heavily since 2001. Okay, keep going, Chuck.
Take away our dollars. Take away everything we have. We are going to fight this fight. I am going to stand with you in this fight. And
what?
Sorry, who's been taking away our dollars now? I thought it's you people and your crony bureaucrats who've been wasting all our money.
I mean, I feel like this is like it should be an Antifa rally or some leftist protest rally where they're like, what do we want? Corruption! When do we want it? No! What do we want? Corruption! I mean, it's like, can you
like
open
when he talks about
definition of projection for me? Holy balls.
Well, how he talks about our money, he's actually kind of honest, right? It's his money that he's concerned about. But then there's all these idiots holding signs that somebody gave them, and they are from the public. So it's not really their money that's being taken away. It's Chuck Schumer's money that's being taken away.
Literally. No, to your point, I think he's literally saying our money.
My money. I want my money.
And what... I'm not going to play the rest of it. It's just him chanting, we will win, with very low energy and not very many people.
Let's watch that because it's pretty funny. It's probably the worst chant I've ever seen.
Let me share it again. There it is.
We will win. We will win.
What do we want? Corruption. When do we want it? Now.
Now he modifies it. Wait for it. He modifies it.
We won't rest. We won't rest. We won't rest.
Look how excited they are.
Thank you, everybody.
Two people behind him. I mean, talk about being disconnected from, the reality of whatever situation that we're living in right now. All right. So I don't even know where I froze up. So... we were talking about Chuck Schumer. We were talking about Elon Musk going over the what he's finding in U.S. aid, and the thought that I had of if U.S. aid is really starting to stop the flow of cash to these, for lack of a better term, deep state operations, which is the propaganda getting shoved down our throat, which is the funding that a lot of these, presumably the funding that a lot of these particularly Democratic candidates get. And I'm guessing, I haven't seen something yet, but I'm guessing part of the election, in quotes, fortification system funding is coming through this as well. And if it gets blocked even temporarily, how much momentum are they going to lose, particularly, say, in the next midterm? So, and then, as I was talking about that, Nima was like, hey, I just read an article on something relevant to this, and this is the article. So this is the Harris Act Blue refund mystery by @Amuse. as Nima just said, and this is amuseonx.substack.com. So I'll dive into this again, which apparently is the first time for everybody listening. Buyer's remorse or something more sinister? That's the question hanging in the air as we examine the peculiar and stunning pattern of refunds issued by the Harris campaign. In contrast to the Trump campaign, which issued a mere 31 refunds, the Harris campaign processed an astonishing 10,821 refunds. These contributions were all handled through the Democrats' preferred fundraising platform, ActBlue, which has a glaring lack of know your customer protocols. The absence of any real verification raises serious concerns. Were these donations genuine, manipulated, or something even more troubling? Probably all of the above. Consider the curious case of Lane McWilliams, who tops the chart with an astounding 101 refunds. Lane, a California resident, engaged in a peculiar cycle of giving and requesting money back, often on the same day. On November 30th, 2023, Lane received multiple refunds, a pattern that continued into early 2024, culminating in the final set of refunds on February 25th, 2024. What could explain this behavior? Is it an indecisive donor, or is it something more calculated? Lane isn't alone. Diane Gregory from Texas had 91 refunds, and Donald Madison from Washington had 85 refunds, also demonstrated similar patterns. Something here doesn't add up. So this is the first time I've heard about this. I'm glad Nima pulled this article up. And this is really weird. Why would somebody continuously make a donation and then ask for a refund? Make a donation and ask for a refund? And why are we only seeing it on one side of the political aisle? In total, about $5.2 million was refunded by the Harris campaign, with an average refund of approximately $483. The largest single refund, $21,700. Compare that with the smallest positive refund of $1. The scale and range of these transactions are both impressive and unsettling. Refunds span from $1 to tens of thousands of dollars, yet the system facilitating these transactions lacks any robust donor identity checks. ActBlue, unlike other platforms, has no mechanism for verifying the legitimacy of donations, meaning anyone with a prepaid debit card can make a contribution using whatever name, address, or employer that they choose. Now, before I froze, actually, no, I'm going to keep reading before I bring that back up. With over 5,478 unique individuals receiving refunds and some receiving massive amounts, one must wonder why so many people supposedly had a change of heart, if that's even what happened. No one, least of all ActBlue, can definitively say whether these donations came from actual American citizens or were funneled through foreign entities or wealthy domestic players breaking finance campaign limits. So this is just a perfect example of looking at things systematically, right? So this guy's making the point that ActBlue is the only facilitator of campaign finance, which I don't know if that's true or not, but the only facilitator of campaign finance that doesn't have any way of really tracking where the money comes from. And this is obviously a systematic issue where the law isn't properly requiring them to do so. And now, I believe, would be an opportune moment to say, if we've got the Republican majority who theoretically is against this sort of stuff, I know, in private they might not be, but often this is a great opportunity to say, look, we have the people here, here's the policy to fix this. They can't be seen saying no. And we're all excited. I'm going to minimize this for a second. Oh, come on, computer. There we go. We're all excited about the flurry of executive orders that have been coming in from the Trump administration. And it's important to remember that all executive orders are a flash in the pan. If they're not followed up by actual policy from the legislative branch, they could be flashed in the pan out, just like we saw during the Biden administration, where the first thing he did was undo a ton of the executive orders that Trump did. And when Trump got into office, the first thing he did was undo like 78 or 72 orders that the Biden administration did. That's not real policy. It's not real policy. The executive branch still has to work within the framework that the Constitution and the legislative branch gives it. Now, the legislative branch has given too much power to the executive branch, but they still have to operate in that framework. And so it's really, really important that I think this is an excellent opportunity to say we have the momentum. This is something that could be fixed now if it was the proper lawmakers at the federal level were approached. So I'll keep reading. This is not an isolated issue or an anomaly. It's a systematic pattern that raises serious questions about the integrity of campaign financing. When comparing refunds state by state, California unsurprisingly takes the lead with 2,261 refunds, followed by New York, 837, and Texas, 752. The widespread nature of these refunds, both geographically and numerically, demands answers. In an era where we can track even the most mundane transactions, how is it Act Blue is allowed to operate as if it's the Wild West of campaign finance? And I mean, this is just such an amazing point that particularly since 2001, September 11th, 2001, we have probes up every fucking orifice. Well, my phone right now is listening to what I'm saying, so it can continuously create this profile for me to offer me ads of what I'd like to buy. Facebook, not that I use Facebook anymore, is still selling all its data to anybody who wants to buy it, and every person has every single frickin' transaction of everything that they do tracked. But for some reason, Act Blue can't figure out where this money's coming from. Or, I mean, is clearly intentionally not worrying about where the money is coming from in this world where it's so easy to track everything. He goes on, the need for reform in Act Blue's practices is urgent to prevent what seems to be an open invitation for fraud. To which I said before we froze, I don't think this is where Act Blue needs to be reformed. I think this is where the law needs to be reformed. So an organization like Act Blue can never arise again. The potential ramifications are serious. There are currently no specific laws requiring Know Your Customer protocols for political fundraising platforms like Act Blue. I mean, there's a systematic problem right there. Where, hey, we have laws saying that, there's a maximum contribution limit of like $2,600 or whatever it is. And you need to show that, or that you have to require that the person gives information. But I'm sure the law doesn't say anything to the effect of you need to make sure that that information that they give you is accurate. Right? This absence presents a glaring loophole, exactly, that undermines the credibility of campaign finance regulations. Of course, it's what I was just saying. Without a mandatory Know Your Customer system, the system can easily be exploited by wealthy donors. Yes. The need for regulation to impose Know Your Customer standards on platforms like Act Blue. He's kind of repeating the same thing.
Not necessarily wealthy donors, but state actors, more importantly, such as, let's say, USAID, maybe?
USAID, yes. And then this is from November 11th, 2024. This is before the whole lid got cracked off of USAID when he wrote this. This isn't simply partisan conjecture. The sheer volume of data tells a different story. The Trump campaign, in stark contrast, issued only 31 refunds, while the Harris campaign, same number as before, issued about 10,000 refunds. To put this into perspective, Harris processed about 34,800% more refunds than Trump. Are we to believe that Harris supporters had buyer's remorse at such an astronomical rate, or is something sinister at play? Well, I mean, I'd like to make a joke that they had buyer's remorse, but someone who continuously makes donations and then keeps requesting them back, and not just one crazy person, there appears to be a bunch of these people. Obviously, there's something else going on. In dollar terms, the disparity is equally striking. The Harris campaign refunded a total of $5 million, whereas the Trump campaign refunded about $74,000. Moreover, when considering the total amounts raised, $1 billion for Harris versus $400 million for Trump, the Harris campaign still refunded a significantly higher proportion of contributions, approximately 0.5% for Harris, to about 0.019% for Trump. The contrast couldn't be more stark. While no one is directly accusing the Harris campaign of fraud, well, I mean, I might, the questions beg asking. Who are the contributors? Why so many refunds? And why does Act Blue, a platform that processes millions in political donations, have no mechanism for ensuring the legitimacy of those donations? Well, I mean, this is an example where asking the question provides the answer. I mean, let's get real here, right? Where, let me put this down again. He's saying that why would Act Blue have no mechanism for tracking these things? And just the simple act of asking it provides the answer. Clearly, the answer is they don't want it to be tracked, right? And if you ask, well, why wouldn't they want it to be tracked? The only thing that you could assume is they're breaking the law. I mean, this goes back to, like, Animo, what you were saying, that, oh, hey, there is no evidence that we're breaking the law. There is no evidence that we're breaking the law. There is no evidence of breaking the law. That's because you have a systematic method of making sure no evidence is ever collected.
Plausible deniability.
Right? And then in other realms of reality, let's take the court system, for example. If you have evidence, and that evidence has to have a chain of custody, meaning there's a knife or a glove or gun or whatever, right? Once that thing has taken into evidence, there has to be a written, documented account of where that evidence was at any given time for the purpose of ensuring that the evidence isn't tampered with. And in court, if there isn't a chain of custody in evidence, for the gun, for example, the evidence gets thrown out because tampering must be assumed. Well, there's no evidence that it got tampered with. It doesn't matter because you lost the chain of custody. We have to assume the opportunity was there for it to get tampered with, so we have to assume that it was. That's how other realms where the political stakes aren't so high operate when things need to make sense. But when political stakes are high and the amount of money to be stolen is high, they come up with this thing of like, well, there's no evidence that it didn't happen. It's not our fault that we didn't actually track anything, right? It's just so asinine. It's so asinine. And I'm making the argument here that when things are this dumb, that simply asking the question provides the answer. I'll keep reading. The Federal Election Commission's rules are supposed to prevent improper influence, but when campaigns rely, excuse me, when campaigns rely on a platform with zero accountability, those rules become meaningless and easily circumvented. Exactly. Clearly, that's the point here, is that there's this leviathan of rules designed to achieve a certain purpose, but if you put one gap in it, you put one loophole in it, the whole thing becomes meaningless. We got
a comment from Colonel Foley. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the CIA delegated almost all of its foreign soft power to NGOs because it wasn't traceable, and you could experiment a lot more without state barriers. Exactly. That's the new system. That's globalism, basically. That's what Carol Quigley called the potential future pluralist economy, where you have, some kind of octopus or spider web of NGOs that is being hopefully taken down right now. I think that the freak out that we're seeing right now is because the new US administration is onto something. It's because Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency are onto something. And because they're examining it at the level where it has to be examined and stopped, that's why people are freaking out. US aid, white helmets, UN, etc., became the soft power for the financial arm. For the financial arm, IMF and World Bank. Right, you have these institutions, these organizations that use the symbology and the language of government, right? You have the blue helmets, the United Nations in and of itself, by the way, a private organization funded by Bill Gates and a few other billionaires. And they are just sort of imposed on us as if we're supposed to accept them as authority. It's never really a question. It's never really my choice. It's just that, look, they have symbology and they have emblems and seals.
They have credibility. They have titles.
Yeah. It's more it's a loose network of very wealthy institutions, lots of money accumulated in institutions. And where did all this money come from? Not because they're geniuses, but as we're seeing now, because it's just shoveled in their direction by entities like USAID, which, by the way, Marco Rubio is in charge of that. I believe the State Department's technically in charge of USAID. He said that before all this began, right before they started just going in there and cutting it all off, yeah, medical NGOs for sure. He said that they were not interested in any cooperation or any audits or any dialogue or any questions being answered. They were acting like they weren't even part of the government. I heard this on Sam Tripoli's podcast recently, that in turn they heard Marco Rubio explain that. That these people were acting like they're not part of the government. And this goes to there's so many of these semi-government institutions or um, committees. I believe the SEC is technically something like that, and the CDC, all these agencies that are doing policy on behalf of entities such as the United Nations. Relationships occur behind the scenes, but they don't necessarily take orders from the federal government, but for the most part, because they haven't had to for the past decades, because nobody cared to try. Now this government has identified this problem and they're doing something, and so they're freaking out. And by the way, also, I just forwarded you, Dylan, another article from Amuse on X that came out today, where he talks about how, there's. I think this is actually a good sign
Where did you forward it? I don't see it.
I think it was to your Arsonist account
Oh,
at Gmail. Um, some of these actions, like putting a freeze on US aid, have temporarily been supposedly stopped, at least on paper, by a judge. Right? I think the Trump admin is saying we don't give a shit. We're not obligated to spend this money. This is executive privilege. Executive falls under executive authority. But the judge used the argument that the workers that are laid off may experience hardships, even though they're on paid leave, right? They may experience hardships. That's not a thing. That's a private sector civil matter, usually. But I'm thinking it's actually a good sign that the people fighting back have such weak arguments. They're not saying it's not under the president's or the executive branch's authority. They're actually saying that it's because the workers are facing hardships. The workers who are wasting your money are facing hardships, and so they need to be put back in
won't anybody
the
think
office
about the
to
corrupt
waste your money.
bureaucrats and their
Right.
families? Yeah.
It's the weakest possible argument. It's like the federal government has the authority to spend or not spend, to establish departments or not establish departments, unless it violates congressional law or the Constitution. And here's now the argument that these workers are facing hardships. Absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and then just to add to everything you were saying there, I want to bring up the name Charles Merriam, who we've addressed on the show before, who is kind of his claim to fame. His big claim to fame was being the advisor to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And we really live in a Charles Merriam system today, where his entire idea was to create an administrative state where less and less power goes toward the traditional method that we theoretically would learn in civics class. Like, you have your elected representative and who makes the rules, and then the executive branch enforces the rules, and the judicial branch is the one that makes sure that all the rules are being followed correctly. Like, all that stuff, Charles Merriam was like, that's like old school nonsense. It's slow. It's not progressive. We need to speed things up where we start to amalgamate all these things into one, and we're going to do it through an administrative state. And what he found out was you can't do that by becoming elected. You can't do that by battling in the system and the way it worked, which I guess is a feature, right? Because that's the system was supposed to work, where you can't just grab all the power. And so the idea was to create this administrative state where you start having these agencies that get more and more power, and then the people inside making the policies, they're not elected. They don't have cycles where they could say, okay, well, in 4 years I might not be working here anymore because the people are going to pick somebody else. So they have this ability to simply just wait out whoever is being elected, and they get their marching orders from somebody who's not elected, right? They get their marching orders from the WEF or the National Governors Association or the International Panel on Municipal City Managers or fucking whatever, right?
This is government by council, essentially. It's actually kind of like the Soviet Union. I mean, it's not communism, but Soviet Union actually means a union of councils.
Councils,
The
yes.
Soviet. This is like a globalist version of that, except not necessarily under communism, more under fascism. Comment
What?
here from kind of Foley. You're right, Nima. For example, Soros oversaw thousands of NGOs in Africa and in the Eastern European countries. He's like a strawman of the CIA. He probably has diplomatic protection, CIA clearance. Yes, Soros is a Rothschild agent, and his ties definitely go deep. And obviously, tons of money shoveled in this direction. His Open Society received some, 20, 30, whatever, I don't know, some couple of 80 million from USAID, I read recently. China banned its presence for financial terrorism. Yeah, Putin kicked them out 10 years ago. There was a big freak out. I mean, maybe this is just the US iteration of that healthy cleansing process going on around the world to kick
Yes.
these people out.
Well, and then of that U.S. iteration, here's the point that I wanted to make.
And Hungary, by the way, Hungary did that too. Soros's home country, Hungary, banned
Oh yeah, well, I think
several
Belarus has
Soros.
kicked him out someplace. I think Bolivia or something kicked him out 10 years ago, something like that. Whatever.
Which is why, of course, Hungary is upsetting the democracy tards of the European Union, who are now accusing Orban of being authoritarian and anti-democratic. Everything that they don't like is always
Everything's anti-democratic,
anti-democratic.
right?
Yeah.
The people chose something that's so anti-democratic.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of that, just to finish this point, the administrative state. So much power has been given over to the administrative state, and the way that they do it is basically Congress passes a law, or your local state legislator passes a law that says, okay, we create this agency. They're going to do X, Y, and Z. They get a $1 billion, and they'll create the rules. And they just kind of step back from there and let the agency create the rules. And what's interesting about this is that the old system, the system as it was designed, is still there. The legislature still has all the power that it had before. The system is entirely set up and it's still completely functioning the way that it did before. And so the ability for the legislature to actually take back the power from these agencies or to more rigidly define them, to say, no, okay, agency, you do specifically this, as opposed to saying, well, you just make all the rules. EPA, you figure it out. You know what all the rules are. SEC, you figure it out. FDA, you figure it out. The Congress actually has the ability to say, no, this is specifically what you are going to do, and here are the rules that you are going to follow. And when you make rules, they need to be within this tight, narrow definition that we gave. They have the ability to do that.
And this also brings to mind a recent legal ruling that it was quite a while ago, maybe a year ago, but it was a pretty important Supreme Court ruling on the administrative state, and I forgot what exactly it was now. But people said back then that this is going to have ripple effects, and I'll pull it up shortly. So the momentum is in our favor in this regard, for sure. We have another comment here. We can make a parallel with DARPA privatizing every technology during the 1990s with the creation of the Silicon Valley and the garage geniuses, billionaires. Yeah, I mean, the free market is the most convenient method for the military-industrial technology state to dominate you. The purpose of the free market from their perspective is to try out a bunch of things, let the most efficient, most useful technologies prevail, and then utilize them for their own domination regime. Kind of almost goes as far back as the Romans, when their crusades, or what do you want to call it, crusades, when they were on conquests or campaigns, they needed to have a market surrounding them, because they didn't want to take care of every single thing. They didn't want to grow the food for all the horses and hire the blacksmiths and tell them how to make swords. They invented they used a monetary system to take care of all of that. Musk is an emanation of DARPA, just like Bezos, Zuck, and Thiel. Yes, Bezos' grandfather worked at DARPA. Yeah, I mean, it's. I would caution there though that in conspiracy circles, it's so common to make these very quick connections from one to another, right? Musk's dad had something to do with DARPA, and so Musk equals DARPA. It's not necessarily always like that, right? Sometimes you have to be a little more scrutinizing and
Well, and then
on
also I want to
details in
say
your observations.
I've heard this thing about like Bill Gates or Bezos or whatever
Well,
that
so yeah,
they
Musk's
had.
grandfather. Yeah, sorry, Musk's grandfather. He was actually founder, I believe, of the Technocratic Party in Canada. That is true. Is Musk realizing the project's grandfather? We don't know that, right? We don't necessarily know. We can only see what they're doing, and I think it's important to look at as well. People can have a change of heart. People can rebel against their ancestors, etc. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Well, another thing I've heard people comment is that like, oh, Musk and Gates and Bezos, they got this hand up at the beginning. For example, Bezos's dad or something gave him $300,000 at the beginning to start his business or whatever. And I mean, even if that's true, you still have to be a hard-working genius to accomplish what they did, right? Oh, Bill Gates stole the MS-DOS thing at the beginning. He probably did. But after he stole it, he figured out what to do with it, right? I mean, like these people are still smart, even if they're evil, right? And I don't think
This goes also to our Colonel Foley. You may have watched our episodes on the Molochians versus the Luciferians, our discussions with Ian Ferguson. This goes exactly into that, right? We have a new elite taking over now. They're not great. They are probably going to keep the surveillance state going. They're going to do things that we don't like, but they are a heck of a lot better than the Molochians that we've grown so used to over the past decades, if not centuries, if not millennia. I'm bringing up the Supreme Court situation that I was just talking about. There's what's
zoom in.
Okay.
So what's this website?
I think it's a law firm.
Okay.
Is there a law firm? Captain. Associate. Seems to be some kind of law firm with. They have the top search result on Google. The Supreme Court is at war with the administrative state. In 3 major cases decided at the end of the Supreme Court's last term, the court decided against the administrative state, reducing the powers of administrative agencies. Chevron deference to agency interpretations in areas of their expertise was eliminated. So here, this is what Dylan was saying about EPA and all that, right? We can't just establish an agency as Congress and say you can do things and then go away, and then they do whatever they want, and as long as Congress looks away, it's technically legal. As long as nobody does anything, right, it's technically kind of illegal because Congress said they can do things. The public rights exception to a target's right to a jury trial in an action brought by an agency was redefined and limited. The statute of limitations to challenge agency rulemaking was extended to permit a new entity to challenge decades-old rules. Collectively, these decisions shift power away from the agencies, and in some cases Congress, transferring that power to the courts. Decades-old precedents were swept aside to shift the balance of power in Washington. The implications of these decisions extend to all federal agencies. And I don't need to go through all the details here. Now, I'm just saying there is a shift underway. Here's Chevron is
a systematic shift, like a non-sexy systematic shift. I think it's important to emphasize that this stuff that we talk about often, it doesn't fit well in a headline. It doesn't necessarily get you excited and make you want to, get engaged in the football nonsense between, oh, I'm team red or I'm team blue. Let's duke it out. It's a little more calmed down. I mean, I try to jump up and down to make it exciting, but I understand it's not intuitively exciting. But even though it's not intuitively exciting, this is how the system works. And if you want to affect real change, you have to get it at this level.
And I just want to point, slightly unrelated, but something we mentioned on a recent show, right? Remember how I was saying that the German, and I'm just going to share the article. I'm going to explain what it says,
Yeah.
but how in Germany the government is outright funding anti-opposition protests, and then a couple of days later, there's an article that came out. This is grannies against the right movement, and Munich is colorful, and they're just describing this article here. All these
Wait, wait,
NG,
translate the title.
yeah. So it says here.
Who's standing behind the mass
Yeah,
demonstrations in
what's
Germany?
behind the mass
Yeah.
demonstrations in Germany? Because now there's demonstrations in Germany against not just the AfD anymore, but now the CDU also, because CDU is kind of cozying up to the AfD, right? So now there's just anyone who's right of the Greens is bad, and taxpayer money funded organizations are organizing these protests. Giving people these signs to walk through the streets, mostly. I think there's probably mostly, a lot of old people. That's why I see
And I wonder how much of this was
friends
funded by
against it.
U.S. aid, right?
Exactly right. So that's the question. It goes. It doesn't go as far as US aid here, but it talks here about several. Together Against the Right is a network that's currently shilling against the CDU heavily in the social medias, and um, behind that network is a organization called Campact, and they're saying here a spicy detail. Campact is the main owner of the charity organization Hate Aid LLC, and since 2020 they've been getting federal money from the German
Hate
government.
aid. What a name.
Yeah, and you just look at this. I mean, this is regime funded anti-opposition propaganda right here, what you're seeing here going on in Germany. Amazing.
Which is the same thing that happens here, right? And again,
Yeah.
this harkens back to what I was saying: is if that money supply gets stopped, even if it's temporarily, how big of an impact is that going to have on our ability to have elections and to change policy? Like we're in this golden moment where it's like we need to attack now and get this policy changed as much as we can, because if they've had their fuel basically kinked in the hose, we need to make sure that we really change as much as we can before they're able to get that flow moving again. Nima, I'd like to move on to the Jon Stewart interview with the what is it, the deputy defense deputy secretary on the budget.
Just one more thing, one
Yes.
little tidbit I wanted to share, because I just asked Venice AI about this. So I asked it, what types of government fund anti-opposition protests? All right, this is Facebook's language model here, Llama, that's currently configured to be used. Based on the search results, it appears that governments with authoritarian or repressive tendencies are more likely to fund anti-opposition protests. Blah blah blah. Okay, just you can ask all the language models. I've asked several of them. They're all going to tell you the governments that fund anti-opposition protests are repressive authoritarian governments, and that's what's been going on in Germany. That's what's been going on in the U.S. probably to some large extent with USAID. So those are the people who lecture us about democracy and how democracy is in danger and how they represent democracy. Also, let's just get into the comments here real quick. The Silicon guys are probably installing a surveillance state, some kind of a Skynet utopia in all Americas. I think it's possible. It's in the nature of the Luciferians. They do want some sort of control. They want a competitive system, but
But they
they
like to
want to get
cheat the system.
to the top of it. Now, I'm curious to see how the decentralized Web3 crypto economy can be utilized by these people to surveil everything centrally. seems like kind of difficult to me to do, but not saying it's impossible. Of course, still, and they're intelligent and cunning, but without the network, nothing is happening. Nima, I have a
I want to
question.
address that. So,
Yes.
this is, and I'm going to criticize like most people on Earth when I say this, is if I handed you a network, you probably wouldn't know what to do with it. So, yes, they have a network. Yes, the cards may be stacked for them, but you have to have an individual drive, individual know-how, and be willing to put work in that most people aren't willing to do in order to accomplish what people like Musk and Gates and Bezos have accomplished. And so, yeah, without their network, they wouldn't be anything. But like I said, I could pick some random dude on the street and give him a network, and he wouldn't be able to do a damn thing with it.
Yeah. Now we have one more question.
Sidelining us here. I'll get some more water.
I know
Go
what's
for it.
going on with gold. Yeah, I mean, I have some theories on what's going on with gold. Maybe two or three different important things. So number one, Dylan, I need you to share a screen. So there's been this Bank of International Settlements rule that or regulation regime that has been passed recently, or it's been decided on. I just wanted to trying to get the exact date. It seems to have been around June 2021. Okay, so 2020 maybe even. Let's see, what's the date? Let's see if we can find Basel 3. So Basel 3 has made has been a very important development for gold because um, because it has decided that gold is a tier one asset for banks now, which means that it's basically a risk-free asset like treasury and cash. And it determines it has an impact on the risk ranking of the banks. So that is an impetus for banks to hold a little more gold, or maybe way more gold than they did before. And so that is one aspect of what the bigger movement of what's been going on with gold over the past couple of years. So you will notice that gold, I believe, for the first time, started uh, exceeding $2,000, around the COVID times, and then now during the Basel III Accords. I don't know the exact date, but it's been around this time that there's been a major push towards gold. Then another maybe related aspect is the amount of gold that central banks have been buying. I'm just trying to pull up global gold buying by central banks, the World Gold Council. Let's look at what they
Yeah,
say.
I got the World Gold Council here pulled up. I was like, oh, here's another fucking council, and I'm
Hmm.
looking at who's on it, and it consists of uh, the World Gold Council's 32 members are some of the world's most forward-thinking gold mining companies. So they're all gold mining companies, and then it says the board of the World Gold Council has a fiduciary responsibility to all members in ensuring that the World Gold Council fulfills its mission and objectives. So basically, it's a bunch of gold miners who have a stated purpose of making sure gold miners make money.
Yeah,
Just to be clear.
yeah. So I'm gonna share this tab here. So central banks score a hat trick. This just came out a couple of days ago. Sorry, February. Central banks score a hat trick with demand topping 1,000 tons for the third year in a row. Central banks add over 1,000 tons to global gold reserves in 2024. The National Bank of Poland led the charge. Blah blah blah. I saw a chart
The
the other
point that you're
day.
making is that there are large worldwide systematic pulls for these institutions buying gold, which may be a reason why the price is going up. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. Just trying to see if there's a visualization here. Yeah, so it seems to be here very high bars recently. I don't know if this is a recent chart, but 2022. Said 3 years in a row. Oh yeah, it's 2023. So this has been an ongoing trend. So mm my point being that there has been a there have been big um, trends supporting gold buying, generating gold demand for secular trend, bigger trends for the past couple of years, which has definitely helped gold. Now, there's several other factors that come into play. We've talked about this on the show before. Uh, what is uh, what is good for gold? And it seems like um, it seems like real inflation is I call it real inflation. I'll explain in a second what I mean. Whenever real inflation goes high, that seems to be a pretty good trend for gold. And by real inflation, I mean the inflation rate minus the interest rate, minus the risk-free interest rate. Because there may be times when you have very high inflation, but if the interest rates are so high that they counterbalance inflation or even eliminate the inflationary effect on people's cash holdings, then it's not a big impetus to buy gold. But when inflation is high and interest rates are low or expected to go low, then that is a good development for gold. Now, what do we have right now? We have a situation where I don't know if this trend is necessarily at play, but we have expected inflation, at least in the part of the market, because of the tariffs. And also, if you look at the price of eggs right now, I mean, there's some things out there that indicate that inflation is could possibly remain a little elevated. I don't know if I 100% subscribe to that, right? It could be that the market is wrong and the gold price comes back down and just. But also, what's happening is that the interest rate, the long term interest rate, the 30-year rate, and the short term rates, they've all hit a sort of ceiling at around 5%, 5.25%. And there's no more expectation that these rates will be going up much more. In fact, the expectation is that the Fed will cut rates over the coming years. The dispute is over how fast it will cut rates, and there's a minor possibility that maybe they'll raise if inflation pops up again. So all the bad news, like for example, 2022 was a very bad year for risk assets and also gold, because the central bank started hiking rates so aggressively and so unexpectedly. So that was bad for gold. All these effects are now priced in. So the only expectation for interest rates is now that they're going to be coming down. The expectation for inflation is that it's going to stay where it's at, or maybe even going to tick up a little more. Now, if we see sustained low inflation over the coming years, that's not going to be good for gold. Okay, so but at the moment, there's an expectation of some sort of inflationary level of maybe 3% that will be sustained. There's an expectation of interest rates that'll be coming down over the coming years. From right now, we're at around 4% or 4.25%. I don't know exactly where, but expectations that they'll be coming down. We don't know exactly what pace. That supports gold. We have the global central banks buying gold like crazy. We have Basel III, a long-term, big picture trend that incentivizes banks to buy gold. We've had years of gold being underestimated, not talked about. We had a show about this, Dylan. I think in 2022, I talked about. I think, and I said back then, I have really high expectations for gold because the rest of the world has such low expectations. And that got muted because right after we did that show, the interest rates started going up like crazy. That's
Mm.
over now, coming back down. Gold is hitting record highs as we speak. So that's what I think is going on with gold, and that it vindicates, the permanent portfolio and the strategy of having some gold in your portfolio, and it's helped my portfolio certainly do well. Actually, in fact, I may have to sell some gold soon and buy some cheap treasuries and short term and long term just to bring my portfolio back in balance.
Here's a question
Uh,
for you.
So yes, do you know how they are do you know why they are doing the buying?
Oh,
Do you know why they're doing the buying? Well, I think it. I suspect it has to do to a large extent with the Basel III Accords and the new regulatory treatment of gold.
I think his
On the one
question
hand,
is more toward if why would that be proposed in Basel III? What's the thinking of the power players in back saying why we want to propose this in Basel III in order to get central banks to start acquiring more gold?
I don't know honestly. I mean, it could be because the Basel the type of thinking of the Basel approach, which is totally flawed in my opinion, is that banks need to have reserves. The soundness and the safeness of a bank is determined by how much like real assets they hold in their vaults as a backup in case shit hits the fan, which in our opinion is a flawed.
Right. Richard Werner has
Richard Byrne has talked
destroyed
about
that
this as
argument,
well.
basically.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's and also Minsky has talked about this decades ago, that this is tinkering around on the liability side of the bank's balance sheet, and what you need to focus on is the asset side of the bank. What is the quality of the loans made, right? And how do we ensure that banks are incentivized to make good loans and disincentivized from making bad loans? There's some principal agent problem. There's some incentive problem there with banks because they're public-private entities, public-private actors. So they occasionally have incentives to make bad loans and fill the coffers of their management and their shareholders temporarily. So that's the problem. Richard Werner said that London has manipulated the gold price with paper gold for decades. The central banks start to ask for physical count and repatriation. Dot dot dot. Then what? So,
I
I
think what he's saying is that if the central bank started to ask for a physical count and for the actual gold in their hands, then it may reduce the ability of other players to manipulate the gold price with paper.
yeah, I mean this. I don't. I have not heard Werner said this specifically. If you could send us that video, that would be great. Um, I don't subscribe to this gold is manipulated narrative very much because um, I can go to the gold store right now and sell gold at the current spot price or buy it at the current spot price plus a minor premium anywhere in the world. There's very decentralized. It's very unmanipulated in my opinion. Yes, there's paper gold for convenience reasons. There's always some paper gold out there. There's paper gold futures. Not everyone takes settlements on futures because futures to some extent serve as a insurance policy more than anything. So I I, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the gold price is manipulated. I think it's a market, and there's market forces at play. And so, for example, I can tell you what prices are manipulated. I think the diamond prices are highly manipulated because as any divorcee may be aware, when they try to sell their diamond ring, they get sticker shocked by how little money they actually receive for that. Because if you buy a diamond ring for about 1,000, let's say you're a frugal man, which is smart, unlike myself, maybe, although I consider myself frugal too. But you buy a diamond ring for $1,000, you probably have diamonds in there that are worth about $10 or so. So 10, $20. So the diamond market is highly manipulated. You pay way more for it than what you receive when you sell it. So that would be an example of a manipulated market. And the De Beers company is known to have been stockpiling tons and tons of, commercial diamonds, and so those diamonds are manipulated. Now there are obviously diamonds that are highly valuable, very rare, that sell at auctions at Sotheby's, such as the pink diamonds or the rare black diamonds, the Sierra Leone diamonds. Not talking about those necessarily, but just as an example of a market that's pretty manipulated. I think the gold. Also with the diamond market, you have the problem. They're not as homogeneous as gold. They are rather difficult to price. You always need to have some bearded Jew with a magnifying glass sitting there whenever transactions are settled in diamonds. And so, I mean, it's talking about the movie cliche,
Right.
but it's not like gold where you put it on a scale, done deal. You know. For example, it has been said that China has fake gold bar filled with dice. I wouldn't be surprised. China's a fake gold bar.
What's tungsten worth, by the way? Because my understanding is tungsten is actually a pretty valuable resource.
Yeah, diamonds can be created artificially for sure.
Uh,
Gold too,
well, I guess
because
tungsten's measured by tons, so that probably that answers that. One thing I'd say about the gold and tungsten, I just looked up the relative densities, and yeah, gold and tungsten have a very, very similar relative density. However, I feel like that if somebody actually had an accurate scale, you should be able to detect that
yeah,
difference.
no,
If
for
you're
sure, for sure.
getting gold bars, you should be weighing them.
Yeah. Diamonds can be created artificially. Yeah. So I mean, if you listen to any hermeticist worth a salt, Manly P. Hall will tell you that gold can also be created artificially. I'm just kidding, obviously. Um, yeah, gold is very hard to fake. Basically, is the point. And it is an ancient metal. It may have some mysterious magical powers. We don't know, but it's associated
Or
with wealth.
assumed magical powers. Yes.
Yeah,
Even
like
if they don't
Robert
have it, of course.
Kiyosaki.
Yes.
Robert Kiyosaki, for example, he says that he makes a lot of money because he has a lot of gold. So he thinks the more gold you have, the more money will just come to you. Maybe there's some truth to that. Honestly, I think there's having a lot of gold in your portfolio helps you act rationally and calmly in times of turmoil. So maybe there's something to that. It also goes up a lot in value, and then you can buy up cheap assets if you have a balanced portfolio, permanent portfolio type of approach. So maybe.
Especially if there's a crash and you're ready and waiting, right, to buy
Mhm,
everything up on pennies on the dollar.
for
Um,
sure.
if we're done with the gold
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to I've got all these websites popped up now about gold and tungsten and periodic tables and stuff. Okay, I'd like to go back to Jon Stewart, who as much of a dork as he is funny. I will give him credit for that. So this is a video of Jon Stewart, who was recently talking to was the Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks, and because Elon Musk's Doge is now about to be turned onto the DoD, and of course everybody's freaking out, and this is a someone with Trump derangement syndrome basically asking, "What's the problem with an audit?" So let's watch this.
When was this done, by the way?
Unfair questions of some.
I have it on 2 times speed. What's that?
When was this done, by the way? Do you know?
Uh,
2023.
Oh, this is actually old. I didn't realize. I thought this was recent. So this is okay. That explains why Jon Stewart's talking about it, because Trump didn't bring it up yet, and once Trump brings it up, now the liberal commentators are supposed to act like it's evil. So this is before.
Jon Stewart has actually been objective on occasion about Trump too. I mean, he's lauded
Yeah,
Trump for his
he
efforts
gets punished
to.
for it. Is what I've noticed, but I mean, we'll see. Let's listen to this.
Are these? Do you feel like these are unfair questions of somebody within a department of that size and scope? Do you feel that it's somewhat
I think you
unfair?
have a particular thing you really want to talk about, and you're asking me other questions. But I don't think it's unfair to ask me about the audit. It's absolutely the case that the United States military should be able to pass an audit, and we've got to be on that pathway to get there.
But don't you think that does speak to the larger point that we're trying to get at, which is good journalism uncovers corruption? And
Okay, I mean, good journalism does uncover corruption, but I'm not sure these two things are linked. An audit is not.
But they are.
Okay, so you need to explain to me, do you understand what an audit does and the degree to which it is linked to the question that you're asking?
I believe so.
Okay, go
but
ahead. Give me your explanation.
No, I don't mind learning. So what I would suggest is that the audit that they have in the military doesn't really look at whether or not there's efficacy. It's just whether they got delivered the thing that they ordered. And
that is any audit. That is any audit. That is true.
But generally, those audits aren't $400 billion for Raytheon and $1.7 trillion for a plane that doesn't seem to be doing. Like, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse within a system.
Audits and waste, fraud, and abuse are not the same thing. So let's decompose.
So do you see the word game she's starting to play here? Technically, yes, audits and waste, fraud, and abuse are not the same thing. That's correct. But she's totally dancing around the fact that there's bazillions, billions and billions and billions of dollars that can't be accounted for.
Yeah, she's very defensive.
Go ahead.
She seems suspiciously defensive and shrieky already.
Me on
sure. So an audit is exactly what you just described, which is, do I know what was delivered to which place?
Right.
The ability to pass an audit or the fact that the DoD has not passed an audit is not suggestive of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Should we comment or just let John comment on?
Keep it rolling.
Okay.
That is completely false right there. So
what is
now it's a question of, it's suggestive that we don't have an accurate inventory that we can pull up of what we have where. That is not the same as saying we can't do that because waste, fraud, and abuse has occurred.
So in my world,
yeah,
that's waste.
How is that waste?
If I give you $1 billion and you can't tell me what happened to it, that to me is wasteful. That means you are not responsible. But if you can't tell me where it went, then what am I supposed to think? And when there has been reporting.
So.
Right. So in her world, if you don't know where it went, you must assume that it was spent well and responsibly. That's the default assumption that is obviously completely insane, but that's sort of the bureaucrats' defensive thinking.
Well, and
right?
I want to put
just because we can't show you, you can't prove that it was wasted. And he's saying, no, that is the proof.
Well, and let me put this in perspective, without giving too much information about myself, where I can get doxxed. I own a business where I am responsible for handling a small amount of other people's money. Okay, and it's cash. I'm responsible for handling a certain amount of cash for other people, and it's a industry where the state will come in, and I mean they'll audit everything in the business, but they will say, show us your ledger of the cash that you're holding for these other people, and I need to have it accurate to the penny. I have to have a receipt for everything purchased, and the amount of money that it says on that ledger needs to be the amount of money that's actually in that person's slot, right? And if it isn't, you know what citation I get, Nima? Financial abuse.
Yeah.
I get financial abuse because it is assumed that if I can't audit, if the audit doesn't account for everything that was purchased and the amount of money that was there, it is assumed that I abused it. If I'm a penny off, 1 penny, right? So to the point that you were making, Nima, the fact that it's like, well, just because we can't account for it doesn't mean we wasted it or we abused it or it's corruption or something like that.
No, it's complete bullshit.
You can't necessarily connect the two things. Like, what? Go ahead.
It's obviously complete bullshit. And this is also part of these DEI hires that we saw in the Biden era. They can't even cover up the corruption intelligently. Right? And this woman is shrieking and giggling and smirking.
And making John feel like he's the idiot here.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
you're just
and
so
talking
dumb.
down.
You just don't get this. Yeah.
Do you know what an audit is? I'm happy, and he says, "I'm happy to learn," and she giggles about it.
Let's keep going.
I mean, this is not. Look, I'm not saying this is on you, and that you caused this, but I think it's a tough argument to
I'm pretty
make
sure I
that
didn't cause it.
an $850 billion budget to an organization that can't pass an audit and tell you where that money went, like. I think most people would consider that somewhere in the realm of waste, fraud, or abuse, because they would wonder why that money isn't well accounted for. And especially when they see food insecurity on military bases, and they see...
You want to talk about that? Because that's a good... we should be talking... I mean,
Well,
I'm
it's
trying to
Whoa, can we talk about something else? Let's
Yeah.
talk about something else.
Look at the shiny. Yeah, so now she
understand
wants to
where
deflect.
you're trying to go, other than the dollars, which really bother you.
I think it
The
doesn't
dollars
really...
seem to really bother you, John. Why do the dollars bother you? It was so weird. Why are you so worried about dollars?
bother me. I think it's all connected.
Okay.
I think
tell
when
me,
I
tell
look...
me that story. Tell me how you're thinking
Well,
about
he
that.
just
when
did.
I see a State Department get a certain amount of money and a military budget be 10 times that, and I see a struggle within government to get people like more basic services, and then that department that got that, I mean, we got out of 20 years of war and the Pentagon got a $50 billion raise. Like, that's shocking to me. Now, I may not understand exactly the ins and outs and the incredible magic of an audit, but I'm a human being who lives on the earth and can't figure out how $850 billion to a department means that the rank and file still have to be on food stamps. Like, to me, that's fucking corruption. I'm sorry. And if...
Well, and then the level of common sense coming out of his mouth is like, obviously the crowd claps to this, right? Mm-hmm. But he's like, I'm a human being and I live on Earth. I mean, I don't think I think the insult went over her head there. Yeah. But she basically, like, you can use whatever fancy language you want, but you can't account for the money we're giving you. And for some reason, the bottom people aren't getting paid enough. Like, what? Like, how do we square this circle?
Like, if that blows your mind, and if you think like that's like a crazy agenda for me to have, I really think that that's institutional thinking, and that it's not looking at the day-to-day reality of the people that you call the greatest fighting force in the world. So I get back to this idea of, like, I'm not looking to pick a fight with you, but I am surprised at that the reaction to these questions are, you don't know what an audit is, bucko. Like, that's just weird to me.
Okay, on food insecurity.
Okay. Change the subject.
On food, though, let's talk about food. That's what she's competent to talk about. Yeah, what a dimwit. I mean, these people are idiots. So, you know,
I think we've seen enough of that. Well, to get the point, so. Obviously, I mean, I don't know if she's a DEI hire. I don't know if she's too dumb to know what's going on, or she's super smart and she's trying to, word salad and obfuscate and dance circles around John. I don't know where she is on the spectrum, but that interaction was so clear that even though it's intuitively obvious to human beings that if you can't account for a large amount of money that was given to you to achieve a certain goal, that fraud is assumed.
Well, look, this
in
is
the same example that I just gave for myself, right?
This is the kind of bureaucrat that the deep state wants to have in charge up there. This woman who has no clue what's going on, and whose best response is to giggle about a failed audit and billions spent, and to minimize and humiliate the other person's asking the question. I mean, it's unsuccessfully attempt to humiliate the inquirer. This is a dream for the military-industrial complex. This is exactly who they need up there in power. Because did you think that this dimwit is ever going to understand how to decipher the complex structure of military spending and military waste and fraud and corruption?
Well, and then something on an audit, like, an audit just tells you, it doesn't say anything about the purpose of the audit is not about efficacy. It tells you about, that we can have an inventory of what we have. Well, having an inventory of what you have is required for efficacy, right? A component of efficacy is making sure you have an audit to know A, what you have, and that B, the things that you were supposed to be buying are the things that you're buying. Because if you don't have that, people know, hey, nobody's looking, so I'm less accountable for this money. Right? Even okay, it doesn't prove that there's waste, fraud, and corruption. It does, like he said, it does at least prove waste, because if I know that the money I'm spending isn't mine, it's coming in, nobody's looking over my shoulder, I'm not going to be that careful with it. That's like the most optimistic description of what could possibly be happening in that scenario.
Especially in government. I mean, you were
Yes.
talking about the scrutiny over what you're doing in the private sector. This is government where, which is notoriously abusive and fraudulent. Notoriously, it has incentives to keep spending and wasting money without performing. That's the whole problem with government that everyone is aware of since time immemorial. And she's acting like that doesn't exist. You're stupid to
Yes.
assume that.
Well, and yes,
The question for that lady I would have is: so you tell me, at what level are you going to be concerned? So we have apparently she's not upset about what's going on at the moment. She seems to be pretty happy with everything. There's no proof of fraud. Tell me what you would consider fraud, because you know I'd like to
well, let's
hear
talk about food.
justify
Let's talk
that.
about food, Nima.
No,
And,
let's talk about food.
yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about food so I can do a quick speech about how much I care about the food insecurities and how we're going to tackle that issue hands on, blah blah blah.
And I think this is really indicative. It's really illustory. Wow, I don't even know how to use that word anymore. Of how the real battle that we're facing. And part of the real battle that I think we're facing is that the human beings that live on Earth, as Jon Stewart just described, are approaching this with a sense of, how do I make sense of things? And they say, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to that person and have him help me make sense of things. And if I show him that things don't make sense, that person will go, aha, things don't make sense. You're right. Let's try to make sense of these things. That's the assumption that you and I have, right? That's not what they work on. That's not what these bureaucrats work on. What these bureaucrats work on is, I'm in the smart person club. And this is the Charles Merriam idea. He calls it the community of the competent, which draws from Plato's Republic of the Philosopher Kings, which is, I'm in the smart person club. When I speak, it's true. You are not in the smart person club. When you speak, it's quackery, it's charlatanism, it's stupid, it's rubish.
It's conspiracy theory.
It's conspiracy, and it doesn't matter. Like the actual content of what's being, this idea of, let's objectively look at the facts on the table, and then the facts will speak for themselves, sort of thing. That's not what's going through their heads. What's going through their heads is, we're right. Our agenda is unbiased and objectively correct, and anything that comes out of your mouth is stupid.
Yeah, we're the good guys.
They literally believe it. Like, look at her; she's just giggling. Like, I just you don't even understand what an audit is, Bucko. And I think what's so difficult, and when I say this is the real battle, is emotionally, for most of us, it's so hard for us to wrap our mind around that another human being could be like that. I've said this before. I don't even know if I've said it on the show. Good people have a massive error, a massive failure, in that they project their goodness onto evil people.
Absolutely, yeah.
They make the assumption, like, okay, a normal person is going to rationally want to, do the good thing and make sure they're not lying and make sure blah, 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 blah. So therefore, this person can't possibly be doing that. No, wrong. The person is a complete narcissist, thief, psychopath who will lie to your face confidently and laugh at you for being such an idiot, even though what's coming out of their mouth is pure garbage. And the psychological impact of that is, you who think twice about what you're thinking, right? Not just you, Nima, you listening, you're self-considerate, you're self-reflective. You're like, wow, this person, I really need to think about what I'm saying because this person is acting like I'm a complete idiot. Maybe I am a complete idiot. Maybe I need to think about this twice. They're not doing that. They don't have that
Well,
self,
yeah, Jon
right?
Stewart, he
It's just a
expressed it.
weakness that they exploit. Go ahead.
He expressed it nicely at the end, where he was genuinely surprised, but
Yeah.
he thought at the very least she was going to raise the appearance of caring about what
Yeah.
he's talking about, and he found out that that's absolutely not the case. And he found out that she's going to run her show regardless. She's going to run her game on him and ridicule and minimize what he's saying. And he was just genuinely surprised. And I mean, I'm kind of surprised because if you have a competent elite, then you have people who can actually do a good job at pretending to care. I think.
Right.
You know. And
So
it's just
that actually
to
that
this point.
segues into, and again, this starts to get at the system because we've talked about the administrative state. That woman was a perfect example of the administrative state, right? This is an unelected person who's in charge. Deputy, she's the vice person in charge, right? But close enough. She's in charge of $850 billion fucking dollars, and she's just an airhead, right? She's unelected. She could sit on her ass. Well, okay, there's a current administration that doesn't like what I'm doing. Don't care. I'll wait 4 years. Blah. Okay, now the other administration's in charge. Now I'm good again, right? This whole system is set up where this bureaucracy, this administrative state, does not need to be responsive to whatever side of the political aisle, of the partisan aisle, is in charge.
So these are the people who are behind the schemes protesting right now that the money is being pulled. I just want everyone to be aware of that. If you think of a USAID worker or DOD or CIA worker losing their job, their money, it's people like this idiot that we just saw there, this arrogant, smug lady talking down to Jon Stewart about a very important issue.
Right.
A very important,
vastly important issue. And then that segues. I want to bring this up. So this was aired 2 years ago by We the Governed, Glenn Morgan. He's a local activist in Washington State. He's got like a Washington State specific media that looks at corruption. And this is a sound clip of, I want to make sure I get this right, Washington State Representative Davina Dwyer, who's from the 1st Legislative District. Okay, she goes to Portland for some fair and sustainable Yimby Town 2022, whatever the hell that is, right? And she's giving a comment on how local control of government is garbage. Listen to what she has to say. Let me maximize this here.
Complete garbage. Because I'll tell you...
Wait.
The local control, it's garbage. It's just complete garbage. Because I'll tell you, local electeds don't know anything. They literally don't know anything. They go in. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. You get elected and you're just so excited to be there. And the easiest thing in the world to do is what staff recommends because they don't know anything. They don't research. They haven't done their homework. They know nothing about policy. But they like the title. Most of them just like the title, and it's super easy to show up and do what staff recommends. And I'll tell you, I know many local electeds who would love for the state to step in because we are the ones that get accosted in the grocery store by our neighbors who say, "How dare you consider upzoning?"
So this is a pretty interesting.
So, that's the secret. That's the effing secret, is that the local electeds, they're brain dead idiots. They have no idea what's going on, so they just turn around and look to staff and say, what do I do? And the staff are people like this woman that we just watched.
Well, also,
right?
just to be clear, so she is talking about local, which is a far more overseeable far less complex than federal, right?
Yes.
So just picture how much more problematic it is when you get into federal office.
Well, and I want to, again, I want to emphasize this, is that we have a system that works exactly the way that it was designed to work. However, this parallel system has grown up beside it that hasn't overthrown it, hasn't taken any of its power away. It
Yeah,
works the same way it worked before. It's just the culture that has been imbued into the system is simply for these people who get elected to defer to the people who aren't elected. Well, like you heard her say, these local
Yeah,
people,
you have.
Go ahead. You're muted.
We have a bunch. We have
Oh
the
no, I'm sorry.
gerontocracy,
There
right?
was just a delay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we have gerontocracy. We have a bunch of geriatrics who, for the life of them, haven't been able to figure out what Elon Musk and a couple of young guys and some AI have figured out, and who never had any interest in figuring it out. Had a vested interest in looking away and keep their money coming, keep their status and all that. So the system has a lot of tools in place, as Dylan was just saying. But if you have a bunch of people who choose to abdicate their responsibilities, choose to look away, then nothing's going to change.
And then this is why I mentioned this over and over again. Center for Self-Governance, systematic politics, why it's so cool is because these people are such airheads. They're actually really easy to influence. They're super duper easy to influence. And this is what Center for Self-Governance teams, systematic politics teams are finding out all over the country, is that if you put on the veneer of this community of the competent, right? I've got a degree, or I'm certified in the systematic policy learning center or whatever. Suddenly they're like, "Oh, you're one of the people." And if you walk in going, "Here's my research paper on this subject that's causing a problem in your jurisdiction, and here's my recommendation for policy language," they're just like, "You're amazing." Because let me give you another example. In Washington State, we have this thing called the Municipal Science and Research Council, which sounds totally boring. But what they do is they're the ones who craft policy, they craft resolutions, they craft charters for cities in Washington State, and they have no competition. They're the policy generating apparatus for cities, municipalities of Washington State. No one else competes. And so when everybody gets elected, it doesn't matter if they're left, right, center, commie, libertarian, whatever. They go running to the Municipal Science and Research Council because they don't know what they're doing. And so this, we're an unbiased organization that helps all elected officials do whatever. It doesn't matter who gets elected because they're all running to this organization. And the systematic politics idea is to say, okay, forget trying to get people elected or putting all this energy in getting people elected. Why don't we create an organization that competes with organizations like the Municipal Science and Research Council, so there's somebody else for these idiot electeds to run to get their easy policy? We're not trying to blackpill you here saying, "Oh my God, the system's screwed up and it's not working the right way, and oh, look at this deputy, she can't run an audit," and then the local people, they're all idiots and they just want to give their power away to the staff and what. I'm not trying to blackpill you here. What I'm trying to say is that this is the opportunity. This is the opportunity to say, look, this is the weakness of the system. Well, I mean, like Musk is finding out right now. Like Nima just said, okay, you got Elon Musk, you got 4 guys. One of them calls himself Big Balls, and they got AI. They're just like scorched earthing the payment system, right? Going through the payments and auditing everything, and the slow moving retards in the geriatric slow moving retards in Congress and whatever are just like, they're moving so fast we can't even see them. How is this possible? Right?
Just to illustrate how stupid this all is, like Musk recently pointed out that the Social Security database does not actually index by a unique Social Security number. So you can have the same Social Security number in their database multiple times instead of just once.
For multiple people.
Yes. Well, I guess it would be multiple addresses.
I'm telling you. So,
Go
okay,
to them.
this is reminding me of something. So I took these systematic politics classes. We get homework. One of the homework was we needed to interview an elected and a non-elected governing person within the system. One of the other guys had a friend who worked for the Social Security Administration. She was conservative and was afraid to say it because she was afraid of getting fired. And she said, "I've seen 100 people drawing a Social Security check from the same Social Security number."
Wow. Amazing.
And she's afraid to bring it up to management because she'll get called racist because, of course, they're all Mexicans or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
So this is so because we're not talking about rocket science, we're talking about rudimentary concepts of data management, and maybe, I don't know, it's not even computer science, just database. Um, and it's not complicated, right? It's not like Musk is studiously turning over rocks all over the place and
Yeah.
finding the occasional corruption, turning over one rock, and it's like a gazillion cockroaches start scurrying.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's just like a cursory glance is just like, oh my God,
It's like-
cockroaches is a great example. Just, well, let's just look at, oh my God. That was just the first thing I looked under. Whoa. Right. So, I mean, like I said, I think, I'm so happy that Trump won. I'm so happy that we're seeing what we're seeing, but we really have to make sure that we follow up with actual policy changes at all levels. And right now, obviously, the federal level is a prime opportunity to get those policy changes enacted, particularly for the next 2 years. Although, like I said, I'm very curious how the next midterms are going to go if the media and Act Blue don't have the same funding resources that they've had in the past to sway elections and make sure that people don't break democracy by voting too much.
Also, what's this old story about Elon Musk has access to your private data now? What's that all about? I don't understand that. Suddenly that's the Democrats' rallying cry.
Well, I think that's similar to the food insecurities that the deputy person was talking about, which is, let's talk about this over here. Look at this thing. Look over here.
But is that even so?
Yeah.
The Treasury Department has access to Treasury Department data, and the federal government is appointed by the elected president. And the previous federal government had access to the Treasury data. Now the new government has access to the Treasury data. What has changed? Is the argument we don't like the guy?
I think the argument is we don't like the guy, and Elon Musk in particular is unelected, and he's going to get this information even though he's not technically a part of the government, which is whatever. I mean, that's called a consultant.
Well,
I don't know what to say.
I mean, he's more elected than all of USAID, certainly.
Correct.
He's
that's the other thing. Or that woman that we just saw, right? She's not elected. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's the direct advisor of the elected president who won the popular vote and the electoral college vote and the Senate and the House. And it now has something like 70% approval rating, apparently, or at least people saying he's doing what he promised he would do. I just saw a stat recently where on CNN they talked about in 2016 the number was something like 46%.
I saw the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not 70%. What was that, approval rating, or was it he's doing what he?
I don't. I just saw the 46. I don't care about that stuff so much, but the point is well stated. Is that I think it's really, really hard unless you have like the fullest, most insane Trump derangement syndrome to say there's a problem with the audit. Like, because I mean, here's the thing that really gets me is all this information should be public record. Like the Treasury Department, everything they've spent a dime on, I should be able to send an email to the Treasury Department going, give me the records from yesterday to the year 2000.
Yeah, I mean, if any private data, it's the data of the people receiving the money and the people who are corrupt. Maybe that's the private data that they're really worried about.
Right. Well, and then I guess that begs the question is if someone is receiving public funds, it's not private anymore.
Right.
Right. I mean, again, not to dox myself. Part of my business does receive public funds, and that's public information. If someone wanted to make a public records request, they could get that information of every dime that my business received. What that applies at the state level. Why doesn't that apply at the federal level?
Right.
Right. I mean, okay, without opening up the MMT box of saying, well, what exactly is a taxpayer dollar at the federal level, right? They're taxpayer dollars, right? The purpose of the government is the need to I'm sorry, I'm really distracted by this comment by Jesus. The purpose of the government is to provide for the welfare and perform for the people and all that sort of stuff, right? And so any dollar that's created by the federal government and spent into existence, I mean, unless there's literally a national security thing where it's like, this is military for a special operations thing in Button-Stan or whatever, and we can't tell you because that would really screw up the operation. Okay, fine, right? Whatever. But unless it's that, why can't we know where the money went? It's our money. It's the public's money.
Because
right?
it's all some secret special operation in whatever stand.
Special operation, that's right. All the money's secret, all the money's special. But anyway, the fact that we've got the Chuck Schumers and the Maxine Waters. We haven't seen Nancy Pelosi jumping up and down. Maybe that's because she's like in a wheelchair and about to die and getting dementia. But the fact that they're jumping up and down and freaking out, it's just music to my ears that they have such low energy and are so obviously projecting. Like we played in that video at the beginning. Chuck Schumer, like, who gave this unelected person the right to have your private data? It's like, you did 24 years ago. Patriot Act. Hello. Right? Okay, this comment from Jesus. Jesus, are you fucking with us or not? We need to go full communist. Get rid of money and get men being productive. We need to be more like the Amish. Money just creates BS jobs. Have you ever read about how productive a communist country was? They weren't very productive. Just saying.
I mean, productive at what is the question, I guess?
No, productive at killing everybody.
Yeah, exterminating people.
Yeah. Money just creates BS jobs. Yeah, I mean, as
well, if money without oversight does, yes, money that is forcibly extracted and or public money without oversight.
This really goes back to the conversations we've had of our evolution of civilization shows and the Quigley's idea of any institution, or excuse me, any organization. Jesus says, do the Amish use money? Yeah, they carry around briefcases of cash. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in the auction business for many years, and the Amish are pretty big in white-tailed deer auctions, and they do in fact auction off their white-tailed deers and the Siemens in exchange for money.
Did you say Siemens?
Yeah.
Deer semen?
Deer, yeah. There's some of those deer Siemens go for hundreds of thousands of dollars if they're a good breed.
An image I did not want in my mind. How do you collect deer semen? It's not a domestic animal. They run away.
You said you don't want the image. Yeah.
But I understand how you do it with a cow because a cow stands there. It's domestic, right? I mean, not cow, bull, right? But deers are wild. They run away from you. How do you get? Okay. Not to mention when the robots take over and do all the work, what good is money? Well, I'll believe it when I see it when the robots take over.
Yeah. Not going to happen.
I totally lost my train. Oh, yeah. Well, I was talking about Carol Quigley and the institutionalization of instruments, right? So this idea that any human organization is created with a specific goal and that due to natural forces, which I don't have to get into right now, that organization will develop a vested interest where the original goal of the organization either becomes secondary or even contradictory to the new goal of the organization, which is to continue feeding itself, right? And Quigley posits this idea that this is a natural process of any organization. It's not just government. It's not just the big corporations. It's not just state agent. It's literally any organization is like this. And once you recognize the fact that this is a natural process, we can stop freaking out so hard of like, oh my God, the treasury was created in order to do X and now it's doing Y. How are we ever going to get back? Well, no, it's a natural process. And because it's a natural process, here's the way that you have to address it. And we could stop being surprised that a vested interest has developed, because that's the natural process of history, right? So when we're the point that I'm trying to make is when we're saying, we'll look at the DOD and the administrative state and all this sorts of stuff and freaking out and getting comments like, oh, we just need to go full communist and get rid of money because obviously this thing doesn't work. It doesn't matter what the organization that you create is. It will eventually institutionalize, period. So instead of saying, okay, let's swipe the thing clean and then just, here's a better idea, supposedly, I think it's more apt to really do a deep systematic dive and say, okay, do we need reform? Do we need circumvention? How are we going to deal with the fact that there's this vested interest? And I think at the government level that we're experiencing right now, the systematic policy, the Center for Self-Governance folks have really, really, really found the key for generating reform in the system. He was just nodding.
Yeah.
But
which is words, using words to
controlling the meanings of words. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the big hang up, and it's so weird that this is the big hang up, is the fact that you have a community of the competent, that they're in the club, and they have special veneers that show that they're in the club. And if they see each other with those veneers, they listen to each other. And if you don't have any of those veneers, you're a quack, you're a charlatan, you're an idiot, you're a rube, you're whatever, you're a hillbilly that has no idea what they're talking about. And that's I think that's really the underlying pressure that's going back and forth right now.
Well, also that is the old regime, the community of the competent is being taken down right now. Or you could rather say there's a new community of the competent emerging, which goes back to the
at least at the federal level. Yes.
Yeah, I think spiritually worldwide you could also.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
No.
Well, spiritually worldwide, it then becomes a question of, is that spiritual worldwide awareness able to get itself in the reaches of power, or will it continue to be ruled by our Malachian overlords, right? And I think what we've seen recently with the Trump election is that we really have that opportunity at the federal level, but states like, for example, Washington, where I live, they're really digging their heels in to resist.
In California.
So, yeah, California, for example. So, again, we'll see, because I'm very, very curious how things are going to change once that funding from USAID and whatever. I mean, what are they going to find when they do the Department of Defense, right? Is there more money going to Act Blue from the Department of Defense? I don't know, right? Or the Treasury payment system is like Nima said, we've only uncovered one rock, and all these cockroaches scurried out. And what are we going to find as we start uncovering more rocks? I'm very, very curious, like, what stuff is going to suddenly change now that the hidden money isn't supplying it anymore.
And also, at what point do the Democrats shape up and become a party of the people again? Because it seems to me like right now they are self-detonating, basically. Because usually you always have this situation where, okay, new government is in power, new government becomes unpopular because they're blamed for everything. Opposition seizes on the unpopular elements and becomes more popular. Right now, it's kind of like the new government's in power is doing all the popular things, and the opposition is yelling and screaming about these popular things, and kind of almost demanding a stop to that, making themselves, I would think, more unpopular in the process. So at what point do they wake up from that orgy of stupid in a hangover kind of situation and start improving. I mean, we saw, for example, like we discussed a while ago, we saw the emergence of a genuine populist left wing party in Germany, the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which echoes a lot of the AfD's talking points, actually, which is against mass immigration, against climate scam, against COVID or medical tyranny, against vaccine mandates. Um, might be forgetting a couple of things, but basically, all the globalist nonsense that the population hates, they have recognized, they put a left-wing spin on it. They're still supporting welfare spending, still supporting the unions, still supporting treating the workers well, and all that stuff. Does that happen in the US? Do the Democrats, because the Democrats have that kind of faction somewhere lurking inside, I think. And by the way, for example, you remember our friends, the Real Progressives, the
Oh, yeah.
MMT supporting people. They are actually largely supportive of what Doge is doing, supportive of the USAID shutdown, from what I've seen. They're
That's
not
good to hear.
parroting the regime talking points.
Finally, I was worried about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, to that point, I'm wondering if we're going to see a reform of the Democratic Party or if it's going to break up into pieces, and we start having
Yeah.
a coalition situation in the United States.
Yeah, they're already bleeding talent. I mean, some of their best people, RFK and Tulsi, came over to the Republicans
Yeah.
because they were so disgusted and so mistreated.
Bernie, however, stays on forever.
Yeah. So we have some comments.
Mistreat me all you want.
The Democrats are needed. They give the masses the illusion of choice, illusion of democracy. In reality, they're just as right wing as. Well, I mean, I don't really see much illusion even of choice or illusion of democracy on the Democrat side, but that is theoretically their purpose. Yes.
Well, I would have said the opposite thing. I thought the Republicans are the illusion of choice, because they talk up and down about how we want to get back to the way that the Constitution was designed, but over decades and decades and decades, they just never do anything. They're famous for failing after they're given a mandate. So I've always felt that the Democrats are there to drive the crazy, at least within the last few decades, and the Republicans are there to take any energy that's desired to resist that crazy and dissipate it into nothing.
Yeah. Circumvention is what's happening now with the Silicon guys behind Trump against the old guard, old money, just like your last Lucifer. Yeah, that's true. Circumvention.
Well, and I would even say, if we're going to use Quigley-ian terminology, I would say a reform, not circumvention. But I'm splitting a hair.
Mm-hmm. In Europe, Italy and Germany are the most promising for Trump reiteration. France is agonizing. Do you think the Becoming Bridget Candace Owens episode is a psyop orchestrated by the Trump admin? Becoming Bridget Candace Owens? I haven't seen that episode.
Yeah, and then I am very, very suspicious of Candace Owens, by the way. I think she's a grifter. And yes, I agree, France is agonizing. And I'm actually going to bring up Peter Zahan here for a second.
France actually is, I think France is pretty promising. They had a great election result in the recent election. They had to pull out all stops to fuck over their voters and the opposition. So next election, I think it's going to be their turn to get their kind of Trump era. Germany is probably now in 2020, the election is coming up in about 2 weeks, I believe, or even less than 2 weeks. My prediction is the AfD is obviously gonna beat their past. In the last election, they got 10%. Now they're projected at around 22%. So that's probably what's going to happen. They're probably going to get a pretty good result for an opposition party, but the incumbent SPD and the CDU, and then some third party or maybe some toleration by the Greens, weird, shaky government will be formed. I don't know if they want to do black, red, green coalition. So what I'm saying is, I think Germany is now kind of where the US was in 2016 or 2015. No, Bridget the White Woman. That's how it usually goes in Germany. They adopt U.S. trends with a 10 years delay, and that's what it seems like right now to me. Because the attitude overall is still, oh my God, can't believe the AfD Nazis, worst thing ever to happen. There's like a firewall that the other parties are explicitly building against them, supposedly. At the same time, the CDU pushed through a resolution with the AfD's support against some certain mass immigration or certain things. So Germany is going to be. I think France has more national pride and more nationalism than Germany, because Germany has been so browbeaten into accepting globalism. Italy, I don't know much about. I don't think Italy is necessarily very important
Well,
for
and then
but
something I want to throw
Germany
in
and
here.
France are. Yeah,
Don't forget, Italy and Germany have absolutely atrocious demographic charts.
yes,
Uh,
and France
they,
doesn't. Yeah,
they're looking at problems that are well beyond the political
yeah.
that France does not have, which is that they're once the boomers fully retire, there's really not going to be enough people in Italy or Germany to have the country function at any level that it was functioning before.
And then also, I would look at the another promising area is the northern countries. They are almost all swinging towards the anti-regime, anti-globalist factions, either explicitly or with pretty large opposition results. I'd have to look at the exact coalitions right now, but I just looked recently. I think I checked out Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and they do have pretty young and anti-globalist regime governments, either in power or parties in a coalition, and they don't have the demographic. They similar to them and France. Sweden and France supposedly, according to Peter Zehan, and according to numbers, have the best demographic situations.
In Europe.
Italy, Germany, yeah, in Europe, not Italy, in Europe, yeah.
Yeah.
Italy and Germany, not so much. Italy has the benefit of some access to North Africa, some shipping routes, some access to some oil potentially. France as well. Germany is pretty uh, caught in, landlocked and bad demographics. Um, they need some kind of partner to help them out, and right now they're all DEI hires right now, basically. Similar situation there as it was here, the German government. But that is coming to an end slowly, but painfully. It's gonna, unfortunately, take a little longer than people wish it did, I think.
I'm going to bring a comment here by Jesus. Only a capitalist supports welfare spending, immigration, homelessness, I presume, war, incarceration. How else do you maximize profit? Raise the minimum wage to a living wage and see how many of these BS jobs go away. I'm not going to comment on capitalist because that word has so many definitions by so many people. I don't even know what you mean. But we've talked on the show quite a bit about how minimum wage is actually a distraction, and the real thing to do is to create a federal transition job, which would effectively set the minimum wage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Macron is thinking of making the third term, representing his demission. His second election doesn't count because not
Colonel
achieved.
Foley, are you French? Because your English is coming through a little weird.
France is the immigrant first and second generation that reproduce. Yeah, that's probably also true to some extent. That may be why they have such good demographics.
Yeah, because they imported so many people.
All the Africans and Afghans and Arabs reproducing, possible. I mean, I have family in France. They are Iranian, and I haven't been there in a while. So honestly, haven't had the desire to go there either.
Well, you don't want a bunch of French people hating you because you're German?
Exactly.
Fun story. So when I lived in Austria, I had a friend who told me a story about him visiting France with his family, and so they were near the beach and they were in town. They couldn't see the beach, and they're trying to figure out how to get to the beach, right? And they stop it, and they spoke enough French to communicate with this guy, and they asked the guy where the beach was, and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, go down that way, take a left, go around the corner, come up this thing, go down and around," and he gave this really long, complicated directions, and at the end he goes, "By the way, are you guys German?" And they said, "No, we're Austrian," and he said, "Oh, beach is right over there."
Sounds about right. Resignation. Okay.
Oh yeah, and Curl Foley says he is French. Okay. I don't speak any French.
Je ne parle pas français.
Apparently, Nima does. Okay,
No.
so demission means resignation. I want to read this again. Macron is thinking about making a third term by presenting his resignation in the second term election. He resigned in the second election, or he tried to resign in the second election, therefore it didn't count. I don't know. Sounds like political fuckery, whichever way.
Yeah, because he's not the president now, is he? Or how does it work? Did they
fire him?
Coalition? Well, I mean, because his party did so bad, but then they cobbled. Oh no, he is the president. Huh, okay. All right, whatever. I just know that Le Pen got the vast majority of votes of any candidate in the last election.
We love the Germans, but on the other side of the Rhine. We love you. Stay over there. Yeah.
Right.
Quit marching in here and blowing everything up. Yeah.
The Germans felt the same way back in 1920, or whenever the French marched in, I guess, to take the coal.
We're getting distracted here, but remind me the history. Was it God? What king was it? Like back in the 800s? Charlemagne, who he basically had all of Europe in name, not necessarily in force, and because the German system of inheritance was never figured out very well, there was always a fight after the father died, and everything would end up getting split up between the kids, and France and Germany were actually a split up between the kids inheriting it from Charlemagne. Yeah. And so you two fuckers fighting has basically just been two brothers fighting the hell out of each other over 1,000 years. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
get over it.
The system started after the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire fell, right? The Germans started governing themselves. They had these kingdoms, and the kings would always split up their empires among all of their children. And I think the first dynasty was the Merovingians, and then the Carolingians took over. And I believe Charlemagne was a Carolingian.
Yeah.
Carolingian. And the way the Carolingians took over is actually kind of interesting. It was kind of a palace coup, because they were the administrators for the Merovingians. The Merovingians became incompetent, decadent, and ignorant. And there was a guy named Pepin, I believe, Pepin the Short. And then there was his son was Charles Martel, I believe. I might be butchering it now. But then Charles Martel's son ended up being Charlemagne. But yeah, they came out of a dynasty that took over with a palace coup. They weren't the original Germanic kings.
Mm-hmm.
For what it's worth.
Well, the point that I'm trying to
make understood systematic politics.
This is a family feud over 1,000 years old. You guys should stop killing each other about it.
Right.
All right, Nima. I've had about enough, and I have more work to do.
Yep.
So, I think this has been an enlightening conversation. It was very irritating that I froze up at the beginning, but hopefully our editor can make sense of it and post the show. And this has been Dylan and Nima with Irita TV. Check us out at irita.tv. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Rumble. Follow us on Odyssey. Follow us on BitChute. We got a Telegram channel. We got a Discord channel. The link works now on the website. Come chat with us. We love talking to you. And iRead.tv. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.